Hi, everybody. Ray here again. I'm going to read you a story today. It's called Mr. Seahorse. It's a really beautiful book with beautiful paintings by a writer named Eric Carle. Mr. and Mrs. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea. Mrs. Seahorse began to wiggle and twist this way and that. "It's time for me to lay my eggs," she said. "Can I help you?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Oh, yes, thank you," said Mrs. Seahorse, and she laid her eggs into a pouch on Mr. Seahorse's belly. "I'll take good care of our eggs," said Mr. Seahorse. "I promise." As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by. And in this book, I don't know if you can see it, but this page turns to a clear page with beautiful colors on it. You definitely can't see it now because it's mostly green against a green background, but let's see. Anyway, it makes for a beautiful book. And while we're swimming through this vegetation, a group of trumpetfish hidden in a patch of reeds. So this is the reeds over here, and there are the trumpetfish. Excuse me. Phew! I wonder if I'm allergic to the reeds. Anyway, but before long, Mr. Seahorse meets another fish. "How are you, Mr. Stickleback?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Delighted," replied Mr. Stickleback. "I just built a nest, and right away Mrs. Stickleback laid her eggs into it. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "Keep up the good work," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. Look at that. Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea and passed right by. Here's another one of those cool pages. A lionfish hidden behind a coral reef. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Tilapia?" asked Mr. Seahorse. Mr. Tilapia couldn't answer. His mouth was full of eggs. I know," said Mr. Seahorse. "Mrs. Tilapia laid her eggs, and now you're taking good care of them until they hatch." Mr. Tilapia nodded his head. "You must be very happy," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by. What's this? Several leaf fish hidden among the seaweed. They're not hidden now. We turn the seaweed page. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Curtis?" asked Mr. Seahorse. "Perfectly fine," replied Mr. Curtis. "Mrs. Curtis laid her eggs, and I have stuck them on my head. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch." "You're doing a good job," said Mr. Seahorse, and swam away. See the eggs on his head? As Mr. Seahorse drifted gently through the sea, he passed right by a stonefish hidden behind the rock. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. "How are you, Mr. Pipe?" asked Mr. Seahorse. Couldn't be better, replied Mr. Pipe. Mrs. Pipe laid her eggs along my belly. Now I'm taking good care of them until they hatch. You should feel proud of yourself, said Mr. Seahorse, and swam on his way. But before long, Mr. Seahorse met another fish. How are you, Mr. Bullhead? Asked Mr. Seahorse. Tip-top, replied Mr. Bullhead. Mrs. Bullhead laid her eggs and the eggs hatched, and now I'm babysitting. You're doing a fine job, said Mr. Seahorse, and he swam on his way. The time had come for Mr. Seahorse's babies to be born. Mr. Seahorse wiggled and twisted this way and that way. At last, the babies tumbled from Mr. Seahorse's pouch and swam away. One baby turned around and tried to come back into the pouch. Oh no, said Mr. Seahorse, I do love you. But now you are ready to be on your own. Just like that. Out of his pouch. That looks like the end. I love this book. It's about many of the animals in the sea that the fathers take care of the babies initially. Kind of like penguins, after the babies are born, the father stands over them, I think, until they're ready to take a journey. All right, that's all for now. Thanks for listening.